Hi, everybody. Glad you're with us. We will get started in just a moment. See a lot of people joining. Thank you, everybody, for being with us here today. Just opening the room and letting people get in. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Give it another minute or so. You are in the right place. Today, we're talking about the partnership's new strategic plan. Let's give it a little bit more time. It's just the top of the hour now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're just going to get started in just a moment. Hello, Laura, El Paso, Texas. Yes, thank you for putting that into the chat. It'd be great if folks gave a shout out, introduced yourself, let us know who's in the room. We are glad you are with us. All right. Well, I have 1 minute after the hour, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Glad you are with us. My name is Denise Harlow. I'm CEO of the National Community Action Partnership, and we're thrilled today to walk through the recently board-approved strategic plan for the National Community Action Partnership. This work has been ongoing for about a year. Took a little longer. I think it always seems to take a little bit longer than one expects, but we're glad to be here today to kind of roll it out. And we'll talk about how many of you were engaged in its development, provided input during the planning process and feedback after our first draft of the plan was completed. So again, thank you so much for being with us. The chat window is open. Thank you, everybody, for saying hello. We have folks all over the California to Florida and everywhere in between. Thank you so much for being with us. If you have questions as we go through here today, please put them in the chat. We have some team members behind the scenes who will be gathering them together when I miss them, not if, when, and we'll make sure to circle back. I can't promise to have all the answers, but what we'll do is we'll definitely give you some folks to talk to and avenues to go down in terms of some follow-up on the plan. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Ooh, I see from Jasmine, it is blizzarding. That is a great word in Alaska still. So glad to have you with us from up in Alaska. So as we do with all of our events, we're going to start with the promise of community action. And this is where the board started the strategic planning process for the national partnership. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. I hope that you see the promise embedded throughout the strategic plan and that you see it elevated and maintained and relied on as we set our future direction of an organization. I will also want to recognize that we all sit on land that has been inhabited for generations of communities and individuals before us. I'm sitting here in the Washington, D.C. area on land of the Piscataway and the Anaconda people, and I am blessed to be able to sit on this land and respect and give love to the ancestors who were here before me. I hope that you see the work of the partnership being grounded in equity as we go forward. We continue to center our work in equity. We continue to have that as our North Star. In community action, we recognize that equity is our largest container. We do start with racial equity. And I hope that you will see that work embedded throughout today's presentation. So first, a shout out to our strategic planning committee. This group worked tirelessly, multiple committee meetings, oversaw a lot of the information that came through the organization, filtered through the good, the bad, the range of information that we got. Senia Bosman and Amy Turner were the two co-chairs of the board. Senia was our Region 7 rep. Amy was our Region 2 rep. Both have rotated off the board at this point, but they provided great experience and great guidance. The rest of the committee, certainly Delitza Sulamoyo, our board chair, served on the committee. Rick Baker, our current first vice chair, also served on the committee along with Edith White from Region 3 and Maddie Mendez from Region 9. The process was supported by staff because everything has to have, right, that level of support to kind of keep the trains moving behind the scenes. A shout out to Jovita Tolbert and Tiffany Marley on our team who really helped keeping those trains moving, as well as the broader national partnership team. And a shout out to New Chapter Coaching, who were our consultants on this project and provided facilitation assistance, data gathering, and environmental scan assistance, and helped us really frame and think about a lot of the key issues as we move through this process. So what was our process like? It was not meant to be an entirely new plan, soup to nuts, but we wanted to refresh the existing plan. And you'll see this, right? Our mission, vision, and values. And we talked about this on some of the listening sessions we did. The board was very intentional. They looked at the mission and vision and the value statements, and they said, this continues to be the bedrock of this organization and this network. They didn't want to spend a lot of time tweaking that, so they could spend their time on the big picture issues in terms of where we are headed as an organization. We engaged the entirety of the Community Action Network, and we'll talk a little bit about our data gathering strategies. They did reflect on the mission, vision, and values, again, to make sure that they still resonated, and again, to be our North Star as an organization, to make sure that everything that we're doing finds its way into those elements, We also aren't interested in a document that takes up, an inch and a half, acts as a doorstop. In today's world, we know we need to be concise. We need to be action-oriented, goal-driven. So the material you'll see is not page upon page upon page of narrative. It's meant to be high level. It's meant to drive staff and board engagement. And we hope that you see your work embedded in there. And not everything's going to be called out specifically, but please know there's a lot of depth behind the statements that you'll see. And as we as staff begin to operationalize it, you'll be able to see more of that in our work. And if you've heard me do strategic planning trainings in the past, you'll know that we believe that the process itself matters. It's critically important to do the data gathering. It's important to analyze and figure out where your goals are. But even that process of coming together as a network, coming together as a board of directors, that process also matters in terms of doing a good strategic planning process. And I love this quote from John Powell. As you know, John has spoken in several community action partnership conferences and events. Our purpose of being here in the world is not just to live in it. It is to co-create something better. And I hope that's what you see in this plan is the board's intention to co-create with the network, local agencies, state associations, the national partners, state offices, the entire network. And most importantly, the customers and families that benefit from the programs and services that the network provides to create something better, that we're headed toward the vision of the organization. So the first piece really was we had our committee certainly, and as many of you do when you do your plan, we did an environmental scan. And as a network that's as large as ours, right, 1,000+ organizations, state associations, state offices, national partners, 10 million people every year served, it was a lift. But we tried to take some strategy to it to really try to get to some of the key components of the network. More than 250 individuals around the country participated in some way, shape, or form in the data gathering process. Whether it was in a key informant interview, which again included NCAP, NASCASP, OCS, and others to have those one-on-one conversations with our consultants so we could hear the good, the bad, and everything in between. We did facilitated conversations with key commissions. Our board back in late 19, early 2020 established the National Equity and Economic Mobility Commission. We had multiple conversations with the EEMC to ensure that as we went through this process, all the components were grounded in equity. We also talked with our Head Start Task Force and our Energy Task Force and others We did a special meeting with the state associations because we know their perch in the organization also has a very unique perspective that we wanted to make sure we utilized. We also brought a couple of different groups of local agency executive directors to the table, again, for a conversation with our consultant. Again, outside of the partnership staff being in the room to make sure that folks understood and we had an understanding of what the network needed. There were also surveys that that went out to the entirety of the network, as well as the partnerships board and our own staff were able to complete. We had participation in every region of the country, and I believe at least 39 states and or territories participated. What were the key themes we heard in our environmental scan? The first was diversity, equity, and belonging. The network said to our consultants, responded in the surveys, responded in conversations, that they really see the partnership as a critical convener and facilitator of conversations, that they appreciated the work the partnerships board and the leadership the board has taken, and that the way that the partnership has been able to interface with the network on equity over the last number of years. That they see our role as capacity builder to develop tools and resources that we can use at the national level, state level, and most importantly, at the local level to help facilitate conversations around equity. The feedback was that they also needed to see intentionality by the partnership, continued intentionality, that it wasn't a one-off or the last thought, that it was one of the key areas that they needed the partnership to step into and lean into. Which again, you'll see the theme of advocacy filter across the environmental scan. We heard that repeatedly from the network in terms of how do we as a network lean into advocacy and what role can the partnership play to help lift up network voices, help empower and give skills and tools to local agencies, state associations, and others to do advocacy work. And again, you'll see that as we go through here during this presentation. Our second environmental scan theme was social and economic mobility. And if you've seen the partnership present on any issue in recent months or recent years, you know that SEM, social and economic mobility, is one of our key tenets. We know that we talk a lot about Brian Stevenson's quote that poverty is not just about wealth, right? Fighting poverty is about justice. And so we need to lean heavily into this space that we're really talking about both social and economic mobility for families and children. In our environmental scan, we heard we need the partnership to lean into systemic change. We need to amplify the network-wide impact. And the number one question I get in the field, right? You've asked it probably yourselves. Why don't more people know community action? So communication and branding continue to be a need that the partnership needs to step into. Elevating customer voice. Civic engagement continues to come out and making sure that we help our network engage in that space. We help our families and customers that we serve in that space, but civic engagement alongside, again, an advocacy agenda that touches the breadth of what community action does was something we heard repeatedly from the network. And then innovation and evaluation. That community action is a highly skilled innovator in the field of addressing poverty. We know how to use data, but we want to elevate our ability to collect, analyze, and use good data from across our programs and services. And finally, the third thing, and again, this environmental scan was done a year ago, right? So that pandemic fatigue piece was elevated significantly. And I would argue that today we still see it. We're all still living in a world touched by that pandemic. And we're seeing it in terms of workforce issues. We're seeing it in the fatigue of the sector, not just community action, not just human services, right? We are all tired. We know there's workforce recruitment and retention issues that we're having to deal with as well. And what we heard, and I think what we would still hear today if we did similar conversations, how do we as the partnership lift up and support the workforce and community action across this country? So I'm going to pause here and see if there's anything that has come out in the chat that I would need to address. So I don't know if Alex or Rebecca, if anything has popped up into the chat yet. I see shakings of heads. No.
Yes, only one question about slides being made available.
All right. And we will make slides available. So that's good. Thank you. So we also did a board retreat. We did listening sessions. The board met a couple of times, most recently in February to approve the strategic plan. And again, we did listening sessions back in the winter. And I hope that you'll see some of the changes that were recommended reflected in the actual statements that we've developed. So as I said earlier, there's been no change to the mission and vision of the organization. Our mission, again, is to ensure the causes and conditions of poverty are effectively addressed and to strengthen, promote, represent, and serve the Community Action Network. Our vision, and you'll see this vision in the center of our graphics. We have a graphic developed for kind of ease of use, and you'll see right in the middle of it is our vision statement, which is a nation that creates opportunities for all people to thrive, build strong, resilient communities, and ensures a more equitable society. That's what we're leaning into. That's what we want to see as a result of our efforts. And finally, our value statements did not change. If you haven't seen these, I encourage you to take a closer look. I'm not going to read all 4 of them. But again, these statements remain. And every time I look at these, I think different ones pop out at me. I think today, number 2, we believe that this nation has the capacity and moral obligation to ensure that no one is forced to endure the hardships of poverty. For me, that is one of the issues of today, coming out of just some really challenging times right now. What can we do as a nation to truly end poverty in America? And we'll talk about the Matthew Desmond Poverty Book a little bit later as a recommended read. And he talks a lot about that this nation has the capacity, and I would agree. And I believe we have the moral obligation. So finally, this is the graphic that is we're going to build off of here today. You'll see 3 big pieces that wrap around the vision statements. We're going to advance impact and mobility. We're going to pursue organizational excellence. And we're going to build and support the community action movement. The blue and the green, well, in terms of colors, the upper left-hand corner, the advancing economic mobility and pursuing environmental organizational excellence, you may have seen in some elements in our previous plan that building the community action movement, though, when we heard this in our listening sessions, was something that people probably were the most excited about. And what can we do to make sure we lean into that space? So what do these mean? Well, we want to undergird this with what we see as some of the key drivers for mission and vision alignment. As you've heard me say, equity remains our key driver. We also believe that hope, and you'll hear that in the promise, right? And we also know that when we hear from families, what makes community action different? People came and heard hope. They felt supported. They felt that they were listened to in terms of what success meant to them. So we thought it was important to call out equity, hope, and dignity, because we don't want dignity to get lost in the social and economic mobility piece. A life of dignity is critically important. And you've heard me say this before, children are not going to work themselves out of poverty. People living with certain disabilities are not going to work themselves out of poverty. Seniors are not going to work themselves out of poverty. So a chunk of our work in the network is about ensuring that all live a life of dignity. So let's dig into impact and mobility. This is the one that really you feel the momentum, right? You feel things moving forward. Our job here, we're calling it out, is to advance social and economic mobility, to build the capacity for individuals and families, and activate communities and systems to work for everybody. Those of us who are Roma trainers or implementers or Roma professionals and are Roma advocates now in the room, right? We understand family, agency, and community. And when you do your own strategic planning, you know the org standards talk about having those elements in your strategic plan. We do too. We put them here front and center. What does this mean to us? Now, we can't put everything in the kitchen sink into the plan. So we're trying to do our best to elevate some key pieces that we think are important to call out, to be intentional with, and to share in a very public forum. So we want to enhance the network's capacity, training, technical assistance, communities of practice, convenings, trainings, conferences, to innovate and address systemic inequities which cause and perpetuate poverty. You'll see here We're going to increase our deployment of the whole family approach. The whole family, right? And how do we navigate all of that? And you'll see a lot of we're going to talk a little bit later about an event in June that, again, you'll see this specifically elevated. We want to ensure that we're positioned as a leader on the social determinants of health. We talked about the dignity piece, right? And a lot of what community action does, it is about economic mobility, but it's also about provision of services that are critically needed in a household. We recognize that if a home isn't heated in the winter or cooled in the summer, we recognize if the cupboard and refrigerator are bare. We recognize that if housing is unstable and inconsistent, families struggle, the health of people struggle. And so all the core services fit into this as well. That the Community Action Network will increase its capacity. And I know in the listening sessions, we heard a little bit about, well, why climate change? Well, climate change is a critical factor in terms of the families we serve are the canaries in the mine, right? We know that households and communities with low income are often located in the floodplain, or they're located in places with that are going to be significantly impacted by climate change and already are being significantly impacted. We're not going to end climate change as community action, but what can we do in community action to have a role in the work that's going on and to make sure that families, all families, benefit from the technology and science that is not just held in a place for families who are well off, but that all families have access to that technology. Sorry to ramble a little bit. We're also going to be focused on energy justice, weatherization, affordable housing, economic development, job training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We heard in the listening session, I think we just had 2 or 3 then. We did expand it out a little bit. So I hope that you saw your feedback mattered and that we were able to add to this list. Community action, we will help strengthen the community actions network's capacity to respond to the unique needs of populations due to racial, health, environmental, and other structural inequities. And again, people ask us to call out, right? Seniors and older Americans, new Americans, Indigenous people, people living with differing abilities, right? So we want to make sure that we are working in rural, urban, suburban, and frontier spaces, that all of this country is able to be touched in it. And we're helping to, again, help families live with dignity throughout their lifespan. I was part of a recording 2 weeks ago, and at the end they said, well, could you talk a little bit about community action services, just in, in a simple soundbite? Literally in my mind, I went through prenatal, WIC, early Head Start services, all the way through the lifespan. Even to the point of community action sometimes will pay for funeral expenses for families, right? So we believe that all families deserve the right to live with dignity, again, throughout their lifespan. That we will, again, increase the network's capacity to capture, measure, and communicate its impact. Community action agencies use data every day. They use the data they collect to analyze programs. They modify their programs based on that. Don't let anybody ever tell you community action isn't using their data, because that is not true. We use data every day to make decisions. And how can we provide training, technical assistance, and support to help us do a better job of communicating the impact, to analyze the data, to produce the outcomes that you're achieving every day? That we'll do a better job to share the impact. And then the third bullet here was, again, came out of the listening sessions. What about the economic impact? So we've added a third distinct bullet here to definitely communicate the economic impact of this network of 1,000 agencies that leverages $14 billion a year at least in terms of environmental or in economic impact in local communities coast to coast. So before I move on to the next one, are there anything that has come through the chat? I don't see anything at this point. Thank you, Tiffany, and others for putting other content into the chat. Really appreciate it. Organizational excellence. The partnership will promote and support the implementation of organizational and programmatic capacity building to strengthen effectiveness and operations. Organizational and programmatic. We have a lot of tools and resources where we do individual agency consulting or state association work on organizational capacity building. We have a myriad of services that we provide to agencies like strategic planning services and things like that, right? So we're helping the organizational side. Then we have the programmatic side. We have communities of practice around whole family approach or health intersections or increasing impact, right? So we're trying to help both on organizational structure as well as programmatic impact. If you're familiar with the community action theory of change, that may also resonate with you as well. So again, we're going to help organizational capacity and anti-poverty strategies to achieve results. Internal governance, you'll see this called out here. Board service is really hard work in community action. It's not just sitting up here at the Carver governance model where we're just setting policy. We don't want boards in the weeds, but community action board engagement, maximum feasible participation, the tripartite board, that all matters is how we tell our story as well as the impact we have on the ground. So you'll see that consistently again in our work, but we wanted to call out board governance work. And then again, operational excellence. And then we'll again center our work in equity to make sure we live the promise of community action, that we will increase our frequency and depth in terms of training and technical assistance to help the network, again, center equity so we can be responsive to the diversity across this country, and that we can provide tools and resources for all corners of America to have conversations about equity. And not just conversations, but to move the needle as well. That we're going to promote and support implementation of organizational and programmatic capacity building, again, around effectiveness and operations. We want to make sure that our efforts are centered in equity and that we make sure that our equity is a centering principle for operations, programs, and services. You will continue to see that as a critical element of all that we do. As Tiffany likes to say, we bake it into everything we do. And I know for me, I need to lean more intentionally into that space to elevate and to ensure that we are visibly centering equity in all of our work. We're also going to increase our own internal capacity. Those of you who've done strategic planning know you can't just look externally, you got to look internally as well. So we want to increase the effectiveness of our own board governance, our own internal operations. There's always work to improve, certainly as an organization, that we want to ensure that our staff, our entire team has a sense of well-being and belonging. And in this period of time, right, just as fatigue is across the nation through community action and other sectors, it sits within our own organization. What can we do to take care of our organization staff internally as well? And we want to increase our financial health and sustainability, right? So we know that some of the dynamics have changed in terms of funding streams and things like that. So we want to make sure that we are financially viable and healthy as an organization so we can better serve you. So before I move on to the next one, I want to pause here to see if there are any comments or questions. Well, thank you, Tiffany. Oh, this was just to me, but she says a great way to frame our equity work is regardless of what we are serving, equity is always on the menu. And I hope, again, that you see that from our main stages, from our communities of practice, from our training sessions, all of that. I don't see any questions yet through the chat. Did I miss anything? Okay. All right, movement building. This is the one that got folks really excited in our listening sessions, is that we're going to align at the state, local, and regional levels to amplify the community action voice and to advocate for policy changes that support the mission and vision of the network. So again, amplify the voice of community action and advocate for policy change that meets our mission. So we want to strengthen the network's capacity to create policy level change. The network's capacity, local agencies, state associations, regional associations, national partners, how can we all ensure that working together, that we're elevating those policy issues in our own states and communities that we can move the needle on and add voice to others who are also working in that space. We want to increase our engagement with customers and persons with lived experience to amplify the voices of persons with lived experience and to lift up the actions that can be taken on the local level. We will continue and we support NCAP's work distinctly and intentionally. As you may have heard at the recent NCAP conference, the Community Action Partnership is all in. We financially help support NCAP in a variety of ways. And we are so appreciative of everything David does on the Hill around CSBG weatherization and amplifying the community action voice with Congress. And what we hope to do here is amplify and help the local agency network, state associations, and do tools and resources however we can do them to help that work and to amplify the breadth of work that is going on across this nation when it comes to fighting the causes and conditions of poverty. We want to enhance the Community Action Network's capacity to support, again, state and regional community action state associations. I commit to our state association colleagues, partners, and friends. What can we do to make sure that we work together? I firmly believe that a strong state association network is critical to the success of our plan, to the success of the purposes of the Economic Opportunity Act, if we're going to have make a difference coast to coast. And we know finances are what they are in different places around the country. So how can we help best support state associations and regional associations in that work? And what can we do to help increase, again, the engagement with other organizations? You don't fight poverty alone. We know there are so many organizations, even our sister organizations, NCAP, CAPLAW, NASCAS, but also the National Head Start Association, the Association of Public Human Services Association, right? There are a lot of different groups that we lean into and lean with. And we want to make sure we can lift up all voices, again, to fight the causes and conditions of poverty. I'll pause here and see if there are any comments or questions besides Aaron Wicks's request for cookies. That's a continued request as well, if you know Aaron. All right. So some of the next steps. Our plan here as staff is what would be your plan in your local agency, right? We need to develop some short-term and intermediate level goals and action plans for each of these 3 priority areas. Those of you who are executive directors know that you kind of sleep, breathe, eat, consume these plans when they're developed. And for me, I always see them on the horizon. So decisions we make on what grants to pursue, what programs we're offering at our conferences, what special convenings are we doing, how are we investing agency resources? For me, it's that these 3 areas sit on the horizon, sit on the forefront of my mind consistently. So while I don't have a lot of specs to give you today, a lot of metrics to give you today, I commit to you that these will be the priorities that we focus in. That if you see us expending agency resources or asking you to expend agency resources, you're seeing how it fits in with the entirety of the network's direction. We're going to embed this into work plans, into events, and into our budget. Budgetary decisions that the partnerships board will be making will ensure that our financial resources are dedicated to these key areas. Board staff, direction and action, this will be our North Star. And I know it seems like maybe it's still a long way away, but it's really not. 2024 will be our 60th anniversary. And those of you who've heard me speak in this first quarter of the year know I'm already talking about the 60th, right? What can we do to take the strategic plan and the 60th anniversary, that movement building component of our plan? We're going to have a window of time that's going to give us a chance to elevate the visibility, to have a reason to reach out to folks. And we want to make sure we're marrying those 2 pieces together. How can you be engaged? I'm going to make sure you know the names of our board and our regional reps here in a moment, but please stay connected with your National Community Action Partnership Board of Directors. They're the leaders of this organization. We're staff, right? The board are the leaders. They represent the network. They're voted on by the membership. We have no control. It's no self-perpetuating board. You send us our board members. Stay in contact. Engage in a commission. Our board in 2019, early 2020 established a National Community Action Partnership Equity and Economic Mobility Commission. This commission is just we are recruiting for our second 2-year term. It's an amazing, robust commission that is, again, helping us ensuring that everything we're doing is centered in equity. That our Head Start task force, we know Head Start right now is a tough time. There's a bit more wiggle room there if folks are still interested. I think we have a few seats available still for the next 2-year term on our Head Start task force. We'd love to have, if you're interested, reach out. And then our Leveraging Energy and Weatherization task force also, I believe, still has a little bit of room for recruitment. So if you are interested, please let us know. Agencies every day. There's always changes going on. So if you can use this logo in some way, shape, or form, declare yourselves as a member of the Community Action Network. Put it on your website, put it on your materials. Let folks know you're part of this national infrastructure to fight poverty. And again, prepare now for the 60th anniversary, and there certainly is more to come. Now, our officers will have an election this August. We elect all of our 6 officers every 2 years. We're now on an odd number cycle. Given COVID, we had an extra year. Thank you, Brian Duncan, for serving for an extra year during COVID. And Delitzo is finishing up his first 2-year term. He can run for a second 2-year term. And then Rick Baker from Kentucky, Bill Steinberg from California, Brian Duncan is our current 3rd vice chair, Peter Kildee from Wisconsin, and Dreama Paget from West Virginia. And if you don't know your regional reps, get to know your regional reps. Michelle James, Lynn Allgrant, Edith White, Paul Dole, Joe Devaney, Karen Swenson, Willie Soderholm, Maddie Mendez, and Anthony Peterson. Region 7 is currently vacant. Senior Bosman recently retired. And we rely on our board significantly. So get to know your regional reps, let them know what you think, and we'll have regional caucuses at our convention in Atlanta in August. Please join us. What can you do? Build your toolbox. Can't rely on trainings. You can't rely on PowerPoint. You got to build your toolbox. And so you've seen this slide many times, and we keep adding books to it. So I know the book pile gets taller and taller. Poverty by America is my most recent read. I have it here. I have another 10 pages, I think. If you're going to buy one book today, this is the one I would buy today. It's the freshest. Let's help them maintain a spot on the New York Times bestseller list for a while. It's a really good book to read. It's an easy read. If you're passionate about community action, you'll give it a shout out. To several times. Our Community Action Month Toolkit is coming, it is out. We're going to be doing a webinar upcoming. We'll try to put that here into the chat. We will have a calendar of events starting May 1st. Please ensure that your agency is getting engaged. Consider joining our excellence cohorts. I see that I may have been freezing. My apologies, internet, you know how it goes. So Community Action Month, I encourage you to participate. The toolkit is out. Webinar, I believe, is next week. We have our excellence program. It's a great way to also be engaged and help us achieve one of our strategic goals around increasing organizational excellence. New award tiers, more information up on our website. In June, we're going to have a whole family approach convening specific to the whole family approach. You're not exactly sure what I mean when I say whole family approach. Again, a great opportunity to come to DC and be engaged in 3 days of learning specifically about whole family. Convention, join us in August. We'd love to see you in Atlanta. It's going to be a busy few days. We'll have some pre-con sessions as well. I think registration might actually open up later this week, so keep an eye on your inbox so you can register early and often. And my contact information, certainly. We're always here. I know this was a range of pieces that we've given to you, but I didn't just give you updates for the sake of giving you updates. I wanted to give you updates that I thought were related to our strategic plan. And you will continue to see those, whether it's books to read, webinars to attend, campaigns that we're doing. Please, please, please get engaged. The strategic plan should not sit on a shelf. It needs to be a living, breathing document. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chat here to see if anything else has come in Any Q&A, Alex, Rebecca, anything else that has come through the window?
One question from Megan is the agenda for the whole family approach training.
Yes. I see that there are details on the registration link. Thank you, Tiffany, for putting that into the chat. I know some of the agenda pieces are still coming together a little bit, but for the most part, it'll be a chance to, hopefully, if people can come as a team, I think you'll be well served, but we know sometimes financially that doesn't work. But there will be time to hear from national folks, peer to peer. We have a lot of community action agency folks as well as subject matter experts to be part of that group as well. So the agenda will be posted soon, I am sure. All right, and I see email Jay Gregory at communityactionpartnership.com with questions. Great, thank you, Tiffany. All right. There are a bunch of additional webinars that are upcoming. I see those going into the chat as well. But your time. I'm glad that you were with us. I hope that you see yourselves in the plan. Those of you who attended the listening session, I hope you saw some of the tweaks we made to the plan, and that there are elements here that you can use for your own organization, whether it's some of the values, the vision, some of the key theme areas. Please take whatever works for you, leave behind whatever doesn't. But please know this is an agency or a network-wide project to have pulled this together. So with that, I don't see any other questions coming in through the chat. Just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. You know where what my email is. Happy to take questions anytime. Thank you, everybody, for all that you're doing. We really appreciate you. And more to come. Stay tuned. Thanks, everybody.